Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. You see, I recently reviewed the Spyderco cat, but this, my friends, this is no MeerKat. This is a MeerKat. That's right, this right here is the Spyderco MeerKat, which is a fun little knife, weird as heck, but kind of neat. So, thank you very much, first off, to Steve for sending this little guy along. Second, it's worth mentioning, this is a very old model. I mean, this design's been around for years and years, but they have just done a re-release sprint run in the HAP 40 steel with the orange scales and whatnot, so that's kind of neat. Let's do a size comparison real quick. Right here is your Spyderco Dragonfly, which is one of the better, relatively small little knives coming out of there. Right here is your Spyderco Delica, and we'll just stick to the rat number 2 here, because scale-wise, it's about the same. So you can see this is not a very large knife whatsoever. In fact, if I can find my ruler, I can take a look at the blade length and see that this guy comes in just about 2 inches. So there you go. That's your size comparison. Then finally, there is no disassembly video for this guy because, well, that's a pin. And that's a pin, and these are just holding the scales in place. So this is not disassemblable, which is a shame, but hey, such is life. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of your Spyderco MeerKat here. Okay, so first off on the good side, I love the name of this guy. In a world of overblown, high-speed, low-drag tactical knife names like Death on Contact, 0055, Matanza, Paramilitary 2, MeerKat is just having some damn fun. It's a little fun knife, so have a little fun name. And I'm hoping they keep this up in the future and maybe release more in this lineup. Could do one with a bottle opener in the back, the VeerKat, one with scissors built into it, the CheerKat, and maybe one with a 6-inch blade for making steaks, the CheerKat. And then you could get one in H1 steel that's meant specifically for sailors, the FearKat. And of course, one for listening to this section of the review, the CheerKat. Anyway, okay, I'll stop. Next thing, the ergonomics on this guy. Sorry, guys. The ergonomics on this guy are pretty good. In my smaller hands than most, it locks in nicely. You get the finger choil, thumb ramp. So right there, you got good purchase. Then your other fingers wrap around. But one little detail is this back area here. This back area is meant specifically to engage with your pinky finger in this way, which means that this knife is supported not only on this dimension, but front to back as well, because if you push back, it's just going to push against your finger. No big deal. And so this is a well-thought-out ergonomic piece out of Spyderco. Whoa, go figure, right? But ergos are solid. And another thing that I like about this guy is the size. This is a small knife, and the fact that the blade is is right at 2 inches makes this legal pretty much anywhere. So this makes it a more interesting carry for people who are even just, in weird places with weird laws. So you can't really argue with that particularly. Next thing, the blade on this guy, aside from being short, is also kind of nice. It's using HAP 40 steel, which is a solid steel choice, 100%, with very good wear resistance, that kind of thing. And it is a blade shape along the lines of the Dragonfly, although Dragonfly's a little bit longer and a little pointier, but still, it's a nice utilitarian shape, and it's good for a lot of everyday cutting, relatively thin behind the edge. Can't really argue with the blade on this guy. Next thing is the price. I actually don't mind the price on this guy at all. It comes in around $90, and that's actually about the same price as your Dragonfly and G10 scales. And there were a lot of similarities in terms of the interior kind of creation and whatnot, but look, I appreciate the fact that this is a weird sprint run of a weird knife, and yet they're still in a high-end steel, and yet they're still charging a reasonable amount for it. I could see this being crazy expensive, but it isn't, and that's kind of nice. And it's got the weird lock that we'll talk about in a bit here. And then finally, I gotta say, I appreciate that this knife is off the beaten path. There are many knives out there in the world that are, meant to be a 3 to 3.5 inch everyday carry knife with a very... look at every other damn review. But this is a little weird. They're doing something different. So I appreciate very much that they're willing to be weird. And so for me, that all is the good. It's weird. It's got a price that's actually pretty decent for what you're getting here. It's a good blade. It's got a small size, which makes it legal everywhere. Nice ergos, and I do love the name. But let's talk about what's great. So to me, what's great about this knife, 100%, is the lockup mechanism. So a lot of people, and I've left this kind of mysterious to this point just to see if I could get people good and confused, because this is not a liner lock. It doesn't sure look like a back lock. There's no back lock cutout or anything like that. But it's absolutely not a slip joint. This is a locking knife. And so the big question is, well, how do you unlock it? Well, that's because this is using Spyderco's Phantom lock system. The Phantom lock works very interestingly in that in order to unlock it, you need to rotate the scale. Just put your thumb in this divot here and then rotate the scale, and the knife will unlock. And in fact, when you do this, you can see that what it's doing actually is raising the back lock bar, which is letting the knife unlock, which is really kind of neat. So not only does it allow you to do this sort of hidden lockup sort of thing using two hands, but more interestingly, to me at least, this is very one-handable, because what you need to do is just hold the knife like this while it's open, put your thumb so that it's partly against the blade and partly against the scale, and then apply a little bit of pressure in this direction. This will disengage the lock, and then the blade will stop up against your thumb, so it's perfectly safe, and then all you need to do here is just press the rest of the way down. And as a result, this is a knife that is way easier to one-hand open and close than your conventional Spyderco backlocks, which tend to require something like a little shaky thing, and then you close it that way. So I think it's a nice little design, and I think it's actually surprisingly practical. If you just think about it in this way, it's a little bit weird, but if you do it in this way, particularly with that thumb right here so it can't come come flying down on your fingers, then I think it's an absolutely great approach. I mean, it's very, very neat. One common concern that people have is, but Nick, hold on, it'll disengage as you're using the knife. Well, the thing is, no, it probably won't, because in order for this to disengage, you need to be applying pressure on the scale on only one of the scales in this direction. Thing is, and you're actually using the knife, your thumb is applying a bunch of force down in that direction, which is holding it down. I mean, it is really, I'm trying to disengage this lock with my thumb there, and it's not freaking working. The other thing to remember is, let's say through some magic you are able to disengage the lock while you're cutting. Thing is, and I'll do that right now, the thing is, even with that the case, there is this little finger choil down here, and that means that, oh, lock back up on me. That means that it's going to be trying to press against your finger here, and so you're not actually going to get cut anyways. The dull portion is going to stop you there. And so I think this is a very, very neat little lock, and frankly, I wouldn't mind seeing more of it. It does force some compromises, though, and actually, that moves us into the bad section pretty nicely, but that's the great, is this is using the phantom lock, which is pretty unusual. Only seen a couple of knives work like that. The Stan Wilson non-flipper, oddly enough. Something similar in the bolster. But I think it's a great little idea, and I think it's a whole lot of fun. So let's talk about what is bad. Look, bad side, first off, this is not a disassemblable knife. It is pinned throughout here, and at some level, you know what, I get it. Because this pin, basically, the scale needs to be able to rotate around it. And so there can't be multiple screws on here, so it would just be one screw, and that would have to be Loctited like crazy. You know what, just pin it. And it's a backlock knife, which are pretty easy to maintain, even without disassembling them. So it's not something I can get too bad out of shape about, but it is something you want to keep in mind. Next thing, there are absolutely some fit and finish fouls on this little guy. For instance, you can see here that the scale drifts a little bit above the metal there, and similarly, when the knife is open or closed, frankly, there are gaps in the backspacer in this little region. Not so impressive. Seki City is not quite up to the golden and Tai Chung standard in terms of fit and finish, but for what it is, okay, whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, the lock here is just not going to be great in really slippery situations, particularly. I mean, because it relies heavily on friction. If your hand can slide past here, it's a little bit ugly, particularly using this approach here. They've done their best to make sure there's plenty of texture. The Spidey little guy in there, and then all these little texture pads. But that's something to keep in mind if you work the Vaseline factory. Next thing, the closest knife in Spyderco's mainstream lineup to this guy is the Dragonfly. The thing is, the Dragonfly is a much nicer knife to carry in a couple of ways. First off, it is thinner, by a pretty substantial margin. Second, it is way less heavy. The MeerKat's coming in at 2.3 ounces. Dragonfly comes in at 1.2. That's a pretty substantial margin. And so this guy is absolutely going to be heavier, and it's a little less nice in the pocket because it is tip down only. Look, I totally get it that left side carry here, tip up would be pretty much impossible because this scale needs to rotate. And in fact, they've done a really cool thing in even allowing left side tip down carry here, because I'll see if I can show this off. There is a gap inside, can I? Yeah, you can see it in there. There is a gap inside the liner here because they can't just screw right into the liner or else they wouldn't be able to rotate. So there's a gap inside there, a little cutout, and then there is a separate metal plate that is inside the liner here that the clip goes into. You know, it's neat that they went so far to include the lefties on here, but, you know, by doing that, they're able to allow a screw on this side, but I don't think they could do it down here, and especially given that the clip would be on the very far off end of this, and this plastic is not well, it's a little flexy anyways. I can see why they struggle here, but it does still bug me. I don't love tip-down carry. And so, yeah, not a big fan. But it's an understandable foul, given the constraints put on them by this very specific and very weird design. So I'm willing to give them more of a pass than usual. But still, that's one of the biggest downsides of this knife, is tip-down only, at least for me. And another concession to that tip-down only thing is the fact that there is no jimping on this guy. That's something I miss a little bit, honestly, coming from the Dragonfly. And jimping just gives you a little bit more security in the hand. Feels like you're on this a little bit better, whereas on this guy, it's a little bit more slippery. That said, because it's tipped down, I can kind of get it, because remember, this part of the blade is going to be out in your pocket. And so if they had strong jimping on here, this is going to be munching on whatever's in your pocket all day long. And so, although two wrongs don't make a right, I totally understand why, given the tip down carry, they probably neglected to, or not neglected, chose not to jimp it. It's still not something I love. So, anyways, that to me is the bad here, is it's missing the jimping because of the tip-down carry, which itself is not a beautiful thing, although it's kind of an understandable one. The knife is thicker than the Dragonfly, it's heavier than the Dragonfly, and the lock is not going to be great in slick situations. It's got some minor fit and finish fouls, and it is not disassemblable, but that one I totally understand. Let's talk about the ugly here. The ugly on this guy is that these back edges, and this is another fit and finish foul, but the edges on the blade are just too sharp. It needs some chamfering around the blade here pretty badly, both on this area, on this little corner up here, and this is really, really exacerbated by the fact that this is tipped down. Because, you know, if this were a tip up only and this is just up against fabric, I really don't care so much. But this is what's going to be knocking against your wallet all day long, sitting in your pocket there, and so this is something that needs to be chamfered a little bit better from the factory. You can do it yourself with a sharpening stone, whatever, but I don't think you should have to. If they're going to go that way, they should go all the way that way. So, to me, that's what's ugly, is that these edges are left a little bit too sharp. Let's go to final conclusions. Look, final conclusion, this is a weird little knife, but I think it represents one of the most joyful things that Spyderco does on a regular basis. I don't mean ones that I enjoy, but ones that seem to bring them the most joy. Making knives like this, you know, something that is a little bit wacky, but which is at the core a functional tool. And this is absolutely wacky. I mean, the design on it is a little bit odd. The name on it is odd. It's got an odd lock on it, 100%. And heck, it's not even a regular production knife. It's just a weird little sprint run that they're doing on the side here. But even with all the oddity, it is still a functional tool. With good ergos, it can absolutely cut things, and frankly, it's better ground to cut than a lot of what's coming out of really, really high-end makers. And it's still got this lock that is fundamentally safe and I believe functional. And so it's kind of got that little tension there. If you are after a function-first sort of pocket knife, if you want a knife that will get things done, case closed, this probably is not the choice. And if you're looking for something in this size range that is more function-oriented, the Spyderco Dragonfly is the choice. And for the price that you would pay for this, you can get the ZDP model, which has one of the better steels out there too. And so I think this is a functional improvement on the MeerKat in pretty much every way. But if you were looking for something that is neat, unusual, collectible, just plain fun, frankly, I think you probably should check out this little guy right here, Cat. Okay, that was terrible. All right. Have yourselves a good one. Bye now.